everyone to the second episode of the series of the Reality of Fertility, #FertilityUnspoken. I'm Laura Rose of the LGBT Mummies Tribe.
I'm Eloise, I'm founder of Fertility Help Hub.
I'm Karen Jeffries, author and founder of Hilariously Infertile.
And I'm Becky Kearns, and I'm the founder of Defining Mum and Paths to Parent Hub.
Today we will be talking about treatment and just our different experiences and things that we've all been through that many of you will probably sit here and laugh and say, yeah, that's me.
I think we should talk a little bit about what happens when you first enter a fertility clinic, like the uncertainty and the nerves. And then obviously I'm talking about pre-COVID, but sitting in a waiting room, which is often filled with many women, and no one makes eye contact, and everyone, used to read magazines and you just wait for your name to be called, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I always find it crazy that nobody actually speaks to each other, yet you're all in that room for the same reason. I remember once sitting there and it was packed full, so obviously pre-COVID, and suddenly they had the radio playing and the Ace of Base song came on. All that she wants is another baby. And and I was just like, this is the worst song that could be played. And I was trying to make eye contact with someone just to kind of give a little bit of a knowing smile, like roll my eyes, but nobody looked up. It was just bizarre. And obviously they can't control what comes on the radio, but it just wasn't the most ideal song for a fertility clinic. But
I remember before going to the clinic for my first day, I was excited actually, because I was like, I'm going to meet other people who are like going through what I'm going through, and like maybe I'll make friends. I didn't realize that like the unspoken rule that you're not allowed to talk to anyone, you're not allowed to smile at anyone. Like I remember I went in, I was like, someone was reading a magazine and I had already read the article and I was like, oh, that's so great. Just wait till you get to the next page. And they were like, worst look. And I was like, I just didn't get it at first. I didn't know, because if you don't know like the unspoken rules, then you gotta make a fool out of yourself in the beginning.
Yeah. Or if you're sat there and like you really don't want to cough, especially during COVID as well. What I can see during COVID and having a mask on, having to cough, and then everyone looks at you like and moves away. Coughing. It's like that kind of making any noise in a fertility clinic in the waiting room is kind of like deemed wrong, isn't it, really?
Or going up to reception and saying, I really need to pee. Have I got time to go to the loo before my name's called? And they're like, I just don't know. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to chance it. Then come back, sit down, and then your name's called and you're like, is this for blood? Is this for the special? Is this for the scan? And it's almost like your name's called and then you walk off, don't you? In like so quietly. Yeah. With everyone just waiting, looking up and then looking back down again.
I remember at one of the fertility clinics we were at, and it was kind of a bit of a free-for-all in the morning, because you go first thing before work, and so I'd set off about 6 a.m. to get there for 7, and you had to take like a ticket. It was like a deli counter, so then you got your number, and you knew if you got a ticket that was like in the teens that you're gonna have to wait for ages, and it was kind of like everyone was trying to get to the front because they just wanted to get it over and done with. And just not the experience that I expected at a fertility clinic, really. Sat there with your number just waiting for it to be called.
That's really funny, but like it does sound like a deli, right?
Yeah.
I remember I thought, because our clinic opened at 7, and I thought I was gonna be there at 7 o'clock and I'd be the first person there. And I remember getting there like 7:04 and it was packed, and I was like, what? And I remember thinking that it was gonna be like, people that didn't look like me, like what I expected, like I thought older people or something. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like it's everyone, like it just runs the gamut. And then, when you get called back, it's just, I remember sometimes one person would like try to like, not try to cut me, but like maybe try to like skirt around me, and you'd be like called back in order, and I'd be like, just stay in your order, just stay in the order that they called you. Like, why? And like you're all trying to rush to work, and it's very, very hectic and chaotic.
When you'd had like multiple failed cycles, and you got to know certain faces, and you kind of give each other that, oh, you're back again, kind of that sympathy face, like me too. But you'd never have that conversation of like how many DPU, how many cycles, because obviously it's painful. But then that kind of feeling when you saw people come out and we would always be really mindful of, if we came out when obviously we were pregnant, of having the scan pictures, you know, when you were really early, like hidden or put in our bag and stuff, because you'd be really mindful that there were people in there. And once I clocked a woman, she'd noticed that we'd put it in our bag as we walked in, because the room was right there, and her face just kind of folded, and it was just such an awful feeling. But then there were people that would be like, there's always one, isn't there, that wants to proclaim their whole fertility treatment to the whole room, knowing that there's people really struggling, and you'd sit there and they'd be like on the phone telling exactly how big the follicles were and how amazing it is, or yes, I've got the scan picture, and you think, I could throw a cushion at your head. Like, you can see that woman in the corner who's having a mental breakdown. Come on, like, just, they're the kind of times where you think you need to be a bit more cautious, isn't it? And it's hard, isn't it, kind of that back and forth of mentally draining situations, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's really hard too, because like I always say, you know, we don't go through infertility in a vacuum, right? Like if all we had to do was go to the clinic and come home and do literally nothing else, like that would still be a lot. Like you would be putting yourself through a lot, but that's not what it is. Like you're getting up at, like I remember same as Becky, like I was waking up at 4:45 in the morning, so I could leave my house at 5:45, so I could get to the clinic at 6:45, so I could be the first one for blood and ultrasound, so that then I could get to my job on time at 8:24, because you can't be late if you're a teacher. It's not like you can tell your boss I'm a few minutes late because like you've got students waiting for you. So it's just so stressful, and I think that managing the appointments and the clinic and all that stuff on top of your everyday life is very, very, very stressful.
I've got pregnant. With the first baby, my job was flexible. They knew what was going on. Hers didn't. Hers was a company. She didn't want to come out. She was quite private. So she used to have to, like you did, get taxis across town, taxis back. And then if it was in a lunch break, sitting there looking at her watch, like absolutely panicking, because she'd be like, I've got half an hour to have the appointment, get scanned, get in a cab, get back to work in time because I've got a meeting and I can't tell anyone about it. So like you said, that additional level of stress just doesn't help at all, does it?
And it's when you've had that bad news as well, and you're kind of it's not just an appointment. I mean, quite often, because I didn't have many follicles, it was all a bit hit and miss whether or not things would be developing, and I had cycles cancelled partway through. You then have to go in and you suddenly arrive into work and you've got to put this face on like nothing's wrong, or you're waiting by your phone for like a call about your blood results to tell you whether or not you're carrying on. It's like another full-time job on top of your job, and most people don't say anything, and it's just heartbreaking sometimes. You just can't. I remember I used to almost just try and make it through to that end of the day, and then I'd get in my car and I'd just sob all the way home, and it was like everything just coming out. It was exhausting.
Yeah.
Also in the waiting room, when they call your name, I don't know if this is the same with your clinic, but they check your date. I think they asked me to say my date of birth for confirmation. And so I'd listen to all these people's dates of birth, trying to work out, okay, she's 36, she's 38, she's 32, she's 42, just trying to work out like where I was on the spectrum of the people waiting and what that meant. Yeah. And the same with waiting for the egg retrieval and also the transfer, similar waiting room experience. I remember seeing everyone waiting with their partners, and my husband was in London, so I was waiting on my own. And then my father-in-law came in to join me because he was out in New York with us, and he's a silver-haired fox. And we just looked at each other and we just said, who knows what everyone's thinking here? And then I just made a joke to break the ice, and just said to him, because they were calling in partners to give semen samples, and I said, Gordon, I really hope they don't call your name. And he was like, me too.
That's the thing, isn't it? Perception. What people, you do is sit there and you're kind of trying to work out, are they partners? Are they friends? Is it a parent? You know, like, is it a surrogate? You know, just in your mind, you kind of create little stories. Yeah. You used to be like, oh, I think that's so-and-so and that's so-and-so. So he would go, you don't know, do you? You're just making up. And I was like, no, I'm just making up a story in my head because I'm bored. I've been here an hour and a half.
Yeah. And it's the weirdest experience when your partner has to go off to give a semen sample, and then they come back and they like walk into the room and they just sit next to you, and you want to go, how did it go? But it's so quiet in the room, you just feel like you can't say anything to them. And it's just that weird like thing that you're going into these rooms to do such private things that people normally just do in their bedrooms or at home, and it is exposing. And it's like I remember going in for the scan, and I'd sort of strip down, and I'd take my knickers off and I'd hide them under my trousers because I wanted to see those. And then I just lie on the bed and they'd see everything. So I've heard so many people that do that just feel like they need to hide their bra or their underwear, because if the gynecologist sees those, I mean, what? It's just...
But you pull the little blue sheet of paper slightly down, don't you? It's like, oh, it's written up too much. It's like, they can see right in and everything. So really, what is that doing?
That's so true. I think by the time you're so many cycles in, I don't know if anyone else, maybe it's just me, like my background's being a dancer, you're always naked around each other, but going in to have a scan, I just got to the point where in the end, they would be talking with their back to me, putting stuff in the computer, and as they turn around, they'd be like, no, wait, I haven't pulled the curtain yet. And I'd be like there ready, and I'm like, oh, sorry. But even in normal scans, in the end, you're like, I've just got my bits out. Sorry, I'm just so used to being naked from the waist down. This is just who I am.
Yeah, I'm like that now for smear tests and things. It's like, oh yeah, just strip it down. You don't need to turn your back. You're going to see it all anyway.
No inhibitions anymore.
Yeah. When they say with the smear test, oh, it might be a bit uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, no, that's fine. I'm used to being prodded around. Don't
Put
worry.
it in.
Like, whatever. Yeah. Do you guys, when you were talking about putting your underwear like away, do you fold it? I always want, because I always want to fold my clothes, because God forbid that the doctor think that I'm like not neat and tidy, so I always fold my shirt, and then I'll just take it off and put it there and be like, no, that's not neat enough. Like, why do I care if my jeans are folded and my shirt is folded, hiding my underwear and bra in the middle like a sandwich? Like,
did you ever find that when you were getting scanned, obviously when you were on your period, I would get completely naked, but then I'd profusely apologize for the fact that I was on my period, and I'd be like, I'm really sorry, like, trigger warning, I'm really heavy. And they're like, they see that day in and that day out, they've got their head down there in your bits, and they're like, it's fine, should we get on with the scan? But you just feel that kind of, like with the knickers, hiding the knickers, folding the clothes. Oh, I'm really sorry that I'm on my period. Well, obviously you are. And yes, we do it all day, every day. But you get into these weird habits, don't you, of saying these really silly things.
And it's like whether you paint your nails or whether you shave your legs, like how you're feeling, about exposing your whole bottom half.
I think the period scan was the worst, at least for me, for like my pride almost. Like, I remember being like, how am I going to do this? Like, do I put a tampon in before I leave the house? And then when I get there, do I take it out? And then I wait there, but like for how long? And then I'm going to have to put another one in, and just making sure you have all of like the things that you need. Or is it not that heavy right now? So maybe I could just wear like a panty liner there. And then like, it's like the mechanics behind the second day scan when you're on your period is so stressful, because it's just like, not something that you typically have people all up in your business when you're on your second day of your cycle.
Yeah, no, it's a bit grim, isn't it? But you get to that point where you're just so used to it that it becomes such a routine of packing the bag and getting there on time, and it's just like that full routine of monotony in the end, isn't it? Back and forth.
And then I don't know if you guys felt this too, but when I moved on from like IUIs to IVF, the morning monitoring process like kind of changed a little bit. Like the nurses that could take my blood had to be a certain type of nurse, not just anyone, which I thought was interesting. And like all the nurses knew like, oh, this is an IVF patient, and they would almost handle me like differently. Like they'd be like, hi, how are you today? Like really checking in. I'd be like, I'm fine as I was last. Like, it was just different. I remember being like, am I a celebrity now? Like, I felt like I was walking in, like everyone knew me because I was one of the IVF patients. It was like you went from a different echelon, right, up, like almost like a step up of like.
Do you think it's because of the meds as well, though? Because I think they're a bit more conscious that we might be more severely unhinged than normal, because some of the medication ends up making you like just like hormone crazy. I felt that kind of way, that there was more, like, not more empathy, but more handle with care, because
yes,
they might flip at any point about anything.
Yeah. Well, it feels like the last resort, doesn't it? That's the sort of final hurdle, whichever way you're doing IVF, that you can do. So it's the kind of, we've got everything riding on this, make it work, please.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I think with IVF as well, because did you not feel that with the like scans and the appointments, I felt less stressed than I did with IUI. With IUI, I felt like it was like, okay, tracking the ovulation, making sure that, you know, your mucus was at a certain pace, making sure that you knew roughly when that IUI was going to happen and getting that window in, and then planning work and everything around it. But with IVF, because I had a medicated cycle, it's so managed to the letter. I felt calmer in that respect. Did you feel that way, any of you?
I didn't have IUI, so I can't say for that. But I know what you mean. I felt like I had my hand held. And then suddenly when it's over, it's like, what do I do now? Because you're used to calls and do this on this day and take this then and then come in then.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like with the IUIs, it's a little bit more natural. Like they're just kind of waiting for your follicles to get bigger and to grow. And then it's hard to plan around it, especially with, like you're saying, with work. Like, is my IUI going to be on Friday, or is it going to be on Saturday, or is it going to be on this day? And I've got, you know, meetings on these days, so is that going to interfere with that? Like, it's harder to plan because they're kind of waiting for your body more. Whereas IVF, it's kind of like, we're doing this on the 15th, we're doing this on the 20th, and like, we're good, you know, and it's a little bit easier to manage, to work your life around it.
Can we talk a little bit about the blood work? Because no one really talks about the blood test that you do almost every day. And you feel like, you know, you look like you've got a drug problem because you're bruised and battered. I have really deep veins. So whenever I have a blood test done, I always say straight away, please could you just go in the hand, because you're not going to find a vein in the arm. And every single person who takes my blood is insistent that they're going to find a vein in the arm. So I have to go poke. And then it's like, no, we need to go into your hand. And I'm like, yeah, we could have done that 15 minutes ago.
Oh, no.
Yeah, exactly the same. And I've never been great with needles. I was one of these at school where after the vaccinations I would pass out, and I don't know why. So as soon as I knew I'd got to have IVF, that was one of the first things I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have needles. And I was always fine. But having my blood taken, it was always quite a stressful experience, especially, you know, first thing in the morning when you're a little bit dehydrated. I was trying to drink loads. Yeah. But they'd be like, I mean, I even had it last week because I had to have some blood taken, but they're literally like trying to pump my arm and trying to get as much out as they can. And I'm sat there like, oh my God, I'm going to go. But actually it wasn't me that fainted. So having all the blood tests and everything for IVF, it was my husband who keeled over, and I had to run and get a doctor. He fell over next to the nurse. Yeah. So, there's so many different kind of little stages you have to go through, but the blood work for me was one of the most traumatic bits, just because every time I used to get really anxious about it. Now I'm much better because I think you just become hardened to it, don't you? But
I had the immunology blood test done. They had to take something like 17 or 20 vials in one go, and they were trying from the hand.
My gosh.
And it got to the point where I was like downing water saying, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I feel so sick. And I think I had to come back and redo it at a different time of day. But it was the Chicago immunology test, and it was just mental how much blood they needed. And no one warned me of that. Just went in at 6 o'clock on a whatever morning, probably not having eaten any breakfast or drunk enough.
No.
Yeah. Did anyone else find themselves getting really drawn to one of the particular nurses or anything? I remember there was this one nurse who always used to do my bloods, and she'd be there every time, and I just used to cry on her all the time. But she just used to make me. She was so lovely. She just used to make me so emotional. And I think it's one of those things that when you find somebody on that journey who is really empathetic and gets it, it just makes all that difference, doesn't it? And I almost felt like, well, when we finally had success later down the line going abroad for IVF, I thought I need to let her know, because I feel like, I mean, she'd probably forgotten about me. She probably does that with every person there, but I really felt like we bonded. And I think it is one of those experiences where if you find someone that can do that for you, it can make such a difference.
Yeah, I always say, like, those nurses, they're the nicest people, most wide awake people you'll ever find anywhere, and they're so good at what they do. Like, I remember in the beginning also being scared of the needles, and I was like, I'm not that good at getting my blood taken, which I got over that literally the first time because you just have to, right? And they're just there. They do it so well, so easy. Like there are times where I'm like, oh, did you do? They're like, okay, we're done. I'm like, you did it already,
Yeah.
But yeah, those nurses, they're incredible when you have that bond with one of them, and then you move on. And I always feel bad for them. I'm like, their job must be really hard. Like even when there is a success or there is, a congratulatory moment, that patient then graduates, right?
Yeah.
And moves on, and you're still there helping all of the other patients. And I always think like, that's gotta be really hard. Like they don't really see almost the fruits of their labor, in a way. I mean, they do in that like you're gone, so they must know they did something right. But still, it is hard, I can imagine.
I had one that did two, like she was there for 2 of our IUIs for the third baby. And she, we got talking. She could tell we were just at that point where we were just had enough. And we'd known her from the time before when we had our son. And she was talking, and then she kind of let slip that she had her own babies by IVF. And you just don't realise that half of these people have got into this profession because actually they've suffered too. And she was explaining her infertility journey and how she'd had her children and how it really drives her. And it was really uplifting because then it was like you don't just empathise with us, you know how we're feeling and what we're going through, which was really, really nice. But yeah, it is weird because there's that feeling that bond is gone, kind of like you said, they don't see baby when baby's born or babies are born. They kind of they deal with the really traumatic side of it, which is, yes, they get like you're pregnant finally, but it's that kind of side of, like Becky said, like crying on their shoulder, and that must be really draining for the staff to go through that process again and again and again and see how many people are like broken by it.
I think you've got to be a particular type of person to work well in a fertility clinic, and then it's just really sad where you hear about those that are really not sympathetic and often receptionists and just trying to get responses from people and having to chase and just being met with them just not understanding how important it is to you, that it might just be another blood result to you and it can wait till next week when the consultant's back in, but for you that's everything, isn't it? And so I think you've got to be that type of person to work in a fertility clinic.
Definitely. When I had our last retrieval, I was obviously on my own because it was during the pandemic, and obviously I'd never been through IVF before, and they were just so understanding. And prior to that, I'd had an endometrial scratch, and I knew what it was. I knew all the research, and she was like, "Are you ready?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am." She went, and I must have looked nervous. She went, "Do you want to hold my hand?" And I went, "I don't want to break it." And she went, "Go on, you can." And I know for a fact, because I could see her grimace as she was trying to count to 10 with me, but my hand was literally like that, because anyone that's probably had one, you deserve a medal. It's so painful for that 10 seconds. And I had her hand and she was counting, but she was grimacing at the same time. And I thought, bless you. She was like, "Oh, you did really, really, really well. And you didn't swear." So I was like, I really wanted to. But that kind of level of...
Did she then go up and try and get the circulation back in her hand, like shaking it?
Like that.
Yeah, she's like, then the next day she's like in a cast and she's like, "No, she's always there."
That girl from yesterday, she bruised me, battered. But yeah, it's just mad, like the level of care that they have to give, like the really little things that you remember, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like when they talk you through the first time you go through IVF and they give you all the drugs and the regime. And I remember my husband like literally writing everything down about how to deliver these injections, and just the whole stress of having to do it at home. And we were like, "What, we've got to do this," like not realizing that was kind of, I think naively, I just thought we'd go in for the drugs and it wouldn't be every day and things. And then suddenly you have this great big box that arrives at your door and you think, "Oh shit, this is real now." And I remember I wasn't very good at doing my own injections, but Matt would do them, and I'd literally just lie back, look at the ceiling and just sing to myself just while he did it, because I just couldn't focus on what was happening. The times where he didn't quite get it in the first time, and then it's terrifying, but you kind of laugh at it, and then you do it in all the strange places. So on the floor at a wedding, and went out to do that in the car, and it's just I mean,
what about the fear of mixing it wrong or over, like taking too much, too little? Like I would study that Fullerton pen and be like, "Don't wind it the wrong way." you know, and then just like, am I sure that's the right dosage? And then looking back again, and it's like so much pressure on yourself, isn't it, to get it right? And each time you go in for a scan, kind of like, am I on track? Have I been doing it right?
Well, yeah, and you don't know. I mean, like, you don't, you know, if you're not a nurse or in the medical field, a lot of us haven't given ourselves injections. Like, I had never given myself an injection before in my life before doing IVF. And I remember the same, you know, the same appointment where they teach you everything and they show you your protocol. And I just kept being like, I'm very nervous about the shots. I'm very nervous about the shots. And the nurse was like, you'll be fine. Like, watch this video and you'll be fine. And I was just like, I don't think I'm going to be fine. Like, it was just like she had like the utmost faith in me. And I was like, I've never done this before. Like, I don't know. And I think that looking back, I understood what she was saying, which is like, you'll figure it out because you have to. And like, basically like I did, you know, like I figured out how to give myself injections because I didn't have a choice, you know, but so I think when she was like, it's okay, you'll be fine. Like, that's kind of what she was trying to articulate. But I was just like, I'm not fine. Like, this is not fine. It's crazy.
And I think people don't actually get how it's difficult because emotionally you're going through it, but physically you're going through it as well. So all the hormone changes, and you know, they would sit there and say, this could happen, you could feel like this, and you go, yeah, because you want to get going, you get so excited. And then I was a literal dragon for about 2 weeks when I was on the Superflex. I was on the spray, and she went, your body will go into like a mini menopause, and this is how you may feel. But my wife, how she didn't divorce me at the time, she was like, you were a monster for like 2.5 weeks. I don't know how I dealt with you, but all these changes. And then in the end, the bruising. So even when you're being so careful, the amount of times going back and forth from either side, and she's going, do you want me to do it? Because I got into the habit, like you said, of doing it myself. And I'd go, you're going to have to, because I feel like a pincushion. I feel like if I'm going to put anything in, I'm going to explode. And just that kind of wincing pain of, I'm not being a baby, I'm just covered because I've had so many holes put in me.
Yeah. And then it's not just then the injections, you've then got the pessaries to deal with, and which is a whole other story. And like, you'd have the ones that look like bullets. Yeah. But then I remember with my donor egg cycle, I had loads of issues with my lining being too thin. And so I was told that I would need to take the, you know, the really tiny estrogen tablets.
The ones, right?
The really little ones. And I was told that the best way to get them to work would be to insert them vaginally.
Yeah.
They're so tiny. You don't even know whether you've got it. And
Did you ever drop them?
Been in the toilet trying to put them. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't actually know what's going on. Yeah. No idea. And then and then with the progesterone as well, that's so messy. It's just disgusting.
The progesterone was.
But you just do it, don't you? And all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, disgusting.
One of my progesterone pessaries fell out in the loo. And I texted my specialist and I said, oh my gosh, like I've ruined the whole cycle. It's full now. And she just said, just put another one in. She was so relaxed about it. And then I did. And I'm worried about it for the rest of that 2 week wait. Yeah. I mean, some things are just out of our control, aren't they? And you can just do what you can.
But it's even having to, every few days, give yourself, it's really grim, a clear out, because it builds up. It goes like gum, doesn't it? And having to stand in the shower and do that, and it's just, all your dignity goes, doesn't it? And it's like, I mean, I had the stomach injections, I had the estrogen patches, because like you said about the lining, Becky, like on the last cycle, my lining wasn't thick enough, so I had a mental breakdown about that. So I had patches all over my legs, like ripping them off, like and then having to like fumble around inside yourself to find all this awful gunk, knowing that I then got to put a tablet up there, like they're like Smarties, they're smaller than Smarties. So I'd end up dropping them and being like, then I'd have the rectal ones as well. And I was like, I just need ones for my ears now, really, or my nostrils, and I'm exalted. Oh, it's grim, isn't it?
I was traveling to Puerto Rico right after my transfer, and there was like no way around, not right after, but 5 days after my transfer. And so I didn't want to have the progesterone and oil needles, because I was like, I'm traveling to Puerto Rico. I don't want to go on a plane with needles. Like, they're gonna like strip search me basically. And I had a 18-month-old, and I was like, I don't want to be in a hotel room with a toddler and like all these needles. So can I switch to we call them suppositories, but the pesticides, right? And my doctor, he like, I wouldn't say he warned me, but he was like, well, they're a little bit messy. And I was like, right, but like, you know, I just don't really think I should be in a hotel with needles with a kid. Like, isn't that like not good, you know? Like, isn't that frowned upon?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah. He's like, but if you're at the beach, it might be a little bit messy. And I was like, okay. And he's like, but I'll call them in for you. Like, that was it. I had no warning. And so I start the pessaries, and then I'm at the, like, literally in a bikini at the beach, or in a bathing suit at the beach. And I was like, oh my God. Because I would, you know, put them in and then go put a panty liner on my bathing suit.
Yeah.
Had in my bathing suit, which is, you don't do that, right? Go to breakfast. Then like after breakfast, go down to the pool with my family and drop everything at the pool, drop them, run to the bathroom, take the pad out, right? Because you can't go in the pool with it.
Yeah.
And then, like, I was like, this is messy. Is not the word to describe this. This is a disaster.
And the amount of really nice underwear that's really ruined when you're doing those cycles, you think, oh, that was my favourite, comfiest pair. So I just moved to granny knickers because that was the way forward. So I've had enough of ruining nice underwear.
It's like period pants, isn't it?
So I remember being sort of stood up in meetings and like delivering presentations and things, and then suddenly you just feel it.
Yeah.
Drop,
yeah, the gush.
It's the gush. That is exactly. It is gross.
It is.
Yeah, anyone through fertility treatment will know what the gush is. It's
And you kind of stand there, and all of a sudden, for some unknown reason, you go and try and cross your legs or hold them together because you think if you do that, it's going to keep it in there.
Yeah, no. It's already out by that point. Yeah. So awful. What do you guys think about like the call? Like when you go in the morning for your treatments and they get your blood and your ultrasound and then they call you in the middle of the day. Like for me, those phone calls always came at like the worst time. I always joke that like never once did the call come when I'm like sitting at my desk like eating a sandwich on my lunch break. Like they came when I'm in the middle of an assembly at school because I'm a school teacher, and I have 24 10-year-olds in my classroom. They're telling me that I'm not responding to the follow stim, and then we need to add the Menopur. And so I'm like writing it down, and the nurse is like, okay, so one thing you need to know is the Menopur is really gonna burn a lot. And I'm like, okay, that sounds great, because I can't say what I want to say because my students are literally like right there. Like I have a small group with me at my table, and then like I have the rest of my students during reading, and she's like, no, like she thinks I didn't hear her, so she's like, no, like it's going to burn. I'm like, okay, that sounds fantastic.
Thanks.
And she's like, no, like that's not what and it was just like it never came at a time where I was like, this is a great time for me to pick up the phone. It was always like awful mayhem.
Or you missed the call, and then you're like, was it them that called? And then you're back on a waiting line, and then I think someone called me, but I'm not sure. Oh, we're just going to go and check the notes. We'll just come back to you. It's all just, it's 5 o'clock. I need to know what dose I'm taking by 7 or whatever it is. The panic.
Or sometimes the call would be later. They'll be like, well, actually, they haven't come in yet. They're still sorting them out. It'll be later, but it will be tonight. So then you're sat around waiting. You can't actually settle because you're still thinking, well, I need to know, am I level tying up, am I doing the right thing? It's that kind of sense of panic, isn't it? Urgency all the time.
And also if you're buying your medication like I did, where I was using it and then going to get top-ups from the pharmacy because it's so expensive, kind of like, have I left enough? Am I going to have enough for tonight? I need to know and plan, but some things you just don't know until the last minute. And then you don't want to overbuy because it's so expensive, and you can't just give it away afterwards. I think I had to literally throw away a $900 cartridge after using it once.
Crazy, isn't it?
That was one thing that really surprised me too. We talk about like when you get the big box of all your meds, especially for my IVF cycle, I thought that those meds, all those medications would last the entire month. Like I thought that was a month worth. So what really surprised me was, within the first week, all of a sudden I'm like sitting there looking at this. I'm like, I need a refill. Like, how do I need a refill? And I've only been doing this for 4 days because it was just that part I wasn't expecting. I really thought that the meds were for the whole month and that I was done. And then all of a sudden I'm like, and you're like on the phone with the mail away pharmacy, and you're like, I need these literally by tomorrow, or the entire month is going to be shot. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And keeping it in the fridge, not keeping stuff in the fridge, keeping one in your purse. Like, there's so much to think about, isn't there?
And the one that you keep in the fridge, I think one was called Cetratide. Getting that out, and they said about the whole, it might burn. And I was like, okay, so we were really careful, but a little bit came out of the needle and it went onto my skin, and my whole stomach up to my breast came out in this rash that it looked like a massive welt. It looked like I'd been burnt by a scalding kettle. And I was like, and it was so itchy. And then we got on the phone, and then I was Googling, and I was seeing images, and I was like, oh my God, like I've scarred myself. But it was just the fact that that tiny little bit of fluid had come out, and I'd had an allergic reaction, and my whole stomach came up. And it took like a day to go down. So I was just sat there like itching it round, obviously where it had gone in. Dreadful.
Did you still inject yourself with it though?
Yeah, I injected it like a tiny bit. You know when you push it and you flick it to get the air bubbles out? But we'd obviously pushed it just a bit too much, and a tiny bit of fluid. But as we'd put it in, that tiny bit of fluid had gone round the needle hole, and it just flared up my whole side. And I was like, and it literally looked like a huge welt. You know, like when you get stung by a bee, but a massive bee. It was huge. It was crazy.
So that's the other thing about drawing the needles and getting the air bubbles out. You push it a little bit, and then spurt, loads comes out, and then you think, I've just lost half the dose. What should I do? Like, I don't know if I'm giving myself enough now. Do you have that?
Panic.
Yeah, it's like, that's £200 worth. That's just at the end.
Yeah. And the stress of mixing them. I don't know if you have pens, or like I had the bottles, Fostermon and Merrifert, so I had to mix them, and then you have to have a certain amount mixing. So my wife had to do it, because I was like, no way, I'm going to get it right. So then you stand there, and I'm like, oh, is that enough? And she's like, shh. And I'm like, have you done it enough? Is that right? And then you've got to flick it. It's just the worry, isn't it? Like not like having to do it yourself and making sure that did we get it right that time? Is that the reason why it felt? You know what I mean? You have all those thoughts, don't you?
Yeah. And then the trigger shot. So I'm still in New York with my husband at this point, who just had his surgery, unsuccessful surgery, and my father-in-law. We went on a boat ride in Manhattan, and we went out at to Staten Island at 9 p.m, something like that. And the nurse was coming to the hotel. I can't remember whatever time my injection was. You know, you're given like a 5-minute window. And we got stuck, and we missed the ferry back. So we had to wait for the next one. And I've never freaked out so much. We had to run between onto the boat, just waiting on the boat, hurry, then get a taxi and drive. I got there literally as she arrived at 5 to 11 or whatever time it was, panting, stressed. And she was like, are you okay? And my father-in-law said to me and to her, it doesn't matter if it's a couple of minutes late, does it? And she was like, yes, it does. Everyone's scheduled around the trigger.
Yeah.
Stress.
Yeah. Not that bad, but with my trigger, I remember we were hosting Christmas at my house, because we were doing Christmas on December 15th or 13th or something like that, because we were going to be in Puerto Rico on actual Christmas Day. And so it was just chaos, right? My daughter was there, my 2 nephews, my sister, my brother-in-law, my husband, my mom and dad, my dog. It was just absolute chaos. And they're like, okay, you need to go get this shot or this injection. And they called us on Saturday morning, and we needed to get it by Saturday night. And they're like, well, there's a pharmacy in Manhattan. We're like, we don't live in, at the time we lived up here, we live in the suburbs, that's really far away. So we have to now call around all the different pharmacies while we're having people here. I'm making brisket. I don't even know, it was just it was crazy. And my husband ended up going out and getting it, but it was just, when you're managing all that stuff too, it's a lot. It's really stressful. And then doing it at the exact time that you're supposed to do it at, after everyone's been put down for good Christmas dinner. It was just, it was crazy.
Super stressful.
Don't host Christmas when you're going through IVF.